Our modern nation is a nation of like-minded people, similar to one another in just about every sense, including mainly their ideals and moral responsibilities. We should be a nation of people very much unified and concerned only about issues of the highest importance. If you could imagine a United States with a government that served the people as it was designed to do, with intelligent, enterprising, compassionate people, as we mostly are, in charge of our general direction. And this may sound like an alien world to most, since we are indeed a nation divided on virtually any topic that could possibly be used to polarize a group of otherwise similar people. All of these divisions are founded, funded, sponsored, promoted, manipulated, and exacerbated by the mass media outlets and the pre-approved paradigm in the history of the world, always written by the winners, or the public and secondary education systems, otherwise known as OMDAF, which are ultimately controlled by a very small handful of people. These people have a very real and very specific end goal to their concerted efforts, which have been directed and conducted by the secret societies of the world, which are ritualistic, secretive, and poisonous to a free society, to say the very least. Think about the infinite ways in which we are divided in terms of our individual minds, as well as our prejudices of one another. There are billions of people in the world, and several 100 million in the United States alone, all divided by assorted polarizing topics. There really are too many of these divisive elements of our paradigm to list, but let's just consider 10 examples. Number 1, you've got Republican and Democrat. 2, black and white, rich and poor, civilian and official servant, gay or straight, pro-life or pro-choice, Pepsi or Coke, Fox or MSN, Christian or Muslim, communist or capitalist or fascist, or maybe all three heads of the same beast. So let's start with number 1, Republican or Democrat. Our entire system of, quote, modern government in the United States is based on the false dichotomy of Republican and Democrat. Bloods and Crips comes to mind. If you care to research the origins or the perfection of this primary tactic, divide and conquer, I suggest you do some research into George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, or simply Hegel, or specifically the Hegelian Dialectic. To be frankly honest, our society, specifically American society, is neither capitalist, nor is it communist, nor is it strictly fascist. Although there are, of course, many capitalist and communist and fascist faces of our government, the government is, by its very nature, deceptive, and so it puts a lot of different faces on to pander to whomever needs pandering at that time, but ultimately to divide and conquer the minds of the people whenever possible in accordance with their agenda. Our system of government is a new, improved form of fascism, to be sure. However, that really isn't the entire truth, just one of its many faces. The minds of most ordinary people are controlled very simply by the Hegelian dialectic. On the macro level, or across massive groups of people, but as well as on the micro level, dividing and conquering the very mind of each individual within polarized, quote, camps of the masses. I realize this topic has been completely overlooked in the conventional education system as well as in the mainstream media. However, it is sort of like a beaten dead horse in terms of the, quote, conspiracy theory genre. Now, the topic is completely overlooked in the educational conventional system by design, but we all do need to think very deeply on this tactic used by elite groups of uber-rich people who hold the levers of power in every sense across the entire world. Now, for argument's sake, let's just say the least of their motives is to create a condition where they will remain rich beyond measure, and of course in power, and as well as their descendants, and ditto for their co-conspirators, forever. The Hegelian Dialectic is basically a process of control, very well described in George Orwell's sci-fi novel 1984. I think that was written in 1949. It's not an 80s movie, so that's probably why you never heard of it. But it's used, the Hegelian Dialectic is used throughout history, in reality, by small groups of uber-elite secret societies in order to control the minds of the masses without the knowledge or the consent of the people who set up stakes in these camps. Let's assume for a moment that most of the world's wealth is owned by a very tiny group of people. Now, this is actually a fact. It's not a theory, it's the truth. And let's just assume that these super rich, tiny group of people indeed have an agenda, which means they want to do something. You know, what could they want to do? But this agenda, of course, will benefit themselves very handsomely, and on the other hand, it will certainly affect the rest of the country and, by extension, the world very adversely, meaning negatively. Republican-Democrat is one of the broadest dividing factors in our nation due to the constant, ceaseless, never-ending, quote, news that is centered on every detail of an election years before the election is even dreaming of nominations. Anyways, the mass media drools over elections because they know that means big bucks in advertising revenues, since politicians have, by definition, the biggest, richest backers you can possibly imagine. Did you know that Congress had made it illegal for corporations to fund political candidates running for office? In 1907, the Congress prohibited corporate donors to federal candidates in the wake of the robber baron era scandals. Now, in 1947, the ban was formally applied to corporate expenditures and extended later into include labor unions. So, you know, if Congress is passing all these laws throughout history, 100 years, that's American history, a blink of an eye in terms of real history. But perhaps maybe there's something to it. A lot of people consider this fact and don't understand, well, what could be the problem with corporations giving big, huge donations and big, huge funding to political candidates? Just rhetorically there. In 1974, the Congress enacted limits on individual contributions to federal candidates and political committees in the wake of the Watergate scandals. That was involving Nixon, if you're not familiar. If you don't understand the problems that can arise by allowing political candidates to receive corporate funding or unlimited private funding, then you simply haven't thought about it hard enough. You have been programmed to assume that the American elections are fair and are the obvious result of thoughtful planning by the founders of our nation, and elections have probably always been the way they are today. Nothing could be further from the truth, and that is indeed totally deluded and incorrect. By allowing the newfangled abominations, super PACs, our nation has certainly become a fascist dictatorship, again, one of its primary faces behind the masks of democracy, capitalism, and communism. You must realize that the person with the most money will always win the election in our modern world, And this is always the case anymore, and with very few exceptions to the rule. I'm talking on the local levels, governors, Senate, state Senate. But that isn't even the start of it. Have you ever considered for 1 minute that the Republican-Democrat dialectic is a mind control game designed to pit you and other like-minded individuals against other very similar people with slightly different views on things? By arguing and disagreeing with one another, you have created a situation where the super-rich benefactors of the elite candidate is writing loopholes into the laws which will allow for the agenda of their backers to unfold as planned. Now, just assume this is possible for a moment and consider it as highly plausible, if not irrefutably proved. So, have you ever considered why our political climate has created such a situation where Congress can't act on anything, ever, but the president has carte blanche to do whatever the hell he wants without any consequences? Now, I'm no big fan of Bill Clinton by any stretch of the imagination. If you ever see the movie, video, The Clinton Murders, you'll know why. But Slick Willie was impeached for a BJ, while Michelle Obama is a man undergoing hormone therapy and sex-altering surgery, and the president is a homosexual, crack-smoking Muslim. All his words, deeds, and actions prove that he's dishonest at the very least, and has been married to a man named Michael for all these years. Now, it's no wonder their 2 children look nothing like either of them. Okay, now this also makes it plainly obvious why the current federal executive is so adamantly gay pride. The dude's totally gay. But the point isn't about any of that, truly. The point is, if you opened your eyes and looked at the historical track record of the United States of America, the basic overall agenda has remained constant, immovable, and directly against peace and stability in the world in general, regardless of which Republican or Democrat was running the show. When was the last time we had a normal, everyday, average person to become president? People will say that Kennedy was the last normal guy to be president. However, Kennedy was a Freemason, placed into his position by wealth and the blessings of the elite because he was one of the boys. Now, I think Kennedy ultimately had a good conscience and a moral compass, and decided after gaining the seat of power and the overwhelming love and backing of the American people, he had a change of heart and decided to abolish the Federal Reserve and the CIA, just for starters. Okay? Now, for all intents and purposes, I believe that Kennedy was murdered by this group for going after 2 of their main foundations of power in this world. Again, the Federal Reserve and the CIA. However, this could all really be a cover story. I'm not saying that Kennedy was not murdered or that he was in on his own death. Not saying that. However, I am saying that it could be that he was murdered according to plan. Whether or not he was in on that plan, I don't know. The point is, he was the last person to admit plans to realistically challenge the Fed and the CIA, and was shot dead in the street in broad daylight in front of millions of people. Now, what lesson would an average sheeple or some other congressman or governor with designs on the presidency, what would this teach your average person watching the idiot box, and what would they draw from this incident, if only subconsciously? Any future politician who ever got the bright idea to challenge the Fed or the CIA would certainly think twice. These Freemasons, really the Freemasons are just one face of the true culprits, the true power behind the scenes. But we'll just say for now the Freemasons or the Illuminati are indeed bound by blood oaths to keep their lodge's secrets or suffer the brutal, gory consequences of the oaths. So if JFK really thought that he could do this and announce it from the rooftops ahead of time, then he certainly never saw the bullet coming. Now, did they put him in power or allow him to become president because they sort of figured that he was going to try to stop the Federal Reserve? in order to fulfill this very control point? I don't know, but it makes a lot of sense. And, to give you a modern example, Ron Paul did mention several times in his run-up to the presidential election, he announced that he was all about abolishing the Fed, and if he were elected president, he was going to do all sorts of great things. But we saw what kind of media attention that he received. So they didn't kill him. They just ignored him, and it worked. Nobody voted for him. So the same people are behind the scenes of our government today that they were behind the scenes in Kennedy's time, pulling the strings of the puppets with bribes and blackmail and honey traps and the ever-looming threat of open execution if the puppet ever dare dance outside the tugs and twitches of the shadowy masters pulling the strings. In some rarer cases, we see the same people, literally the same people, year after year, decade after decade, perpetually flowing through the revolving doors of politics and the corporate fascist dictators. It's an extremely incestuous, deceptive, secretive, and highly effective, and not to forget lucrative for themselves, effort. Look at Henry Kissinger or Rahm Emanuel as examples of totally connected individuals who possess not 1 ounce of morality or compassion, yet will win Nobel Peace Prizes, in the case of Henry Kissinger, for negotiating failed peace deals amidst a terrible war which he himself helped to create. This was back in the Vietnam War. Yeah, that's right. Kissinger won a Nobel Peace Prize for negotiating a failed peace deal in a war that he helped create. The Gulf of Tonkin was an incident that was supposedly what caused the United States to enter into the Vietnam War, wherein some Vietnamese gunners shot at a U.S. warship, and so that's supposedly what got us into the war. Well, guess what? Gulf of Tonkin never happened. It's admitted. Freedom of Information Act has uncovered that the Gulf of Tonkin was totally contrived and was simply a false pretext to lead the American people into believing we had some place in the Vietnam War. Now, Republican or Democrat, the uber-profitable, uber-violent, anti-human sector of our reality known as the military-industrial complex values a fraction of a percentage point on an annual report than they do value 100,000 or 1,000,000 innocent human lives. These people are so very callous, heartless, it's difficult to even call them people. There are some people in this world who vehemently believe that our world leaders have been taken over by an alien race and are indeed reptilian shapeshifters.
Reptile wins.
Now, I don't subscribe to this argument, but it certainly would explain a lot. Now, how is it possible for people to reap the rewards of a lavish lifestyle, almost like celebrity, never-ending funds, and just a grand old ride, as a direct result of designing and selling bombs and machines of war that will ultimately be used to kill innocent people? Greed is one reason, but it's not the only reason. Most normal people are typically good in a sense that an average person will typically try to help someone in distress. They love their children and their family and would never do anything to willingly hurt another innocent person. That typically is the case with most people, not just Americans, people all over the world. Even Muslims. The average person is also totally in the dark about the true nature of the uber-rich, uber-selfish, plutocratic, Kabbalistic elites who span the world, who've been running the show since long before America was ever founded, using a variety of methods to control the masses. The reason our country resembles Rome in some respects is because of the spirit of governance of Rome has continued to endure down through the ages as one of this current modern government's one of its many faces. Our modern society is an esoteric blending of occult knowledge, practices, and also tactics of control. These controlling elite have taken the helm of the secret societies, which are governed from the top down. With smaller groups of people in control, the higher up you look in the power structure. This is their fascination with pyramids. It literally depicts their method of controlling the world, controlling you, and is allegorical of their domination of the masses, using a myriad of methods and tactics, but primarily and repeatedly the Hegelian Dialectic, or the process of dividing and conquering large groups of people for one specific end or another, but specifically and simply maintaining their own power and wealth, and of course expanding upon their own power and tightening their grip of control. The only way the Hegelian method works is if the masses are unaware. People often ask me, what is the solution to this? What is the solution to these problems? I mean, you're pointing to these things, but who has solutions? Well, I'll tell you. The solution is awareness of the problem first and foremost. If the majority of people are unaware of the problem in the first place, then you never have people looking to solve a problem which they don't know exists. The majority of people who will see this video in the next month or two are most likely already aware of at least some of the elements and methods used by the elite which I'm pointing to. It's up to each and every one of you to raise awareness into these topics, if for no other reason than for self-preservation, or for that of your children. Our world is at a breaking point, and the elites who are in power are well aware of this. Right now, it's July of 2015, and all the buzz on the idiot box is something's going to happen in September. As a follower of Yeshua, or Jesus Christ, it's important to admit that the prophecies may be fulfilled at any time, although we should certainly not go setting dates on anything, since no one knows the time of the coming but the Almighty God Himself. I would be far more on alert for a false flag attack in September of 2015. Possibly of such a magnitude that has never been seen or known in history. Or possibly nothing could happen at all, just like nothing happened on 12/21/2012, and we know all the buzz about that. It's very important that we do not react to the propaganda that's being perpetrated upon us by the uber-rich, uber-controlling elite who publish and approve everything that is displayed upon the idiot box. Everyone seems to think that there are all these reasons to be afraid of September 2015. However, there's no more reason to be afraid of that time as there was yesterday or 2 weeks from tomorrow. We should all be living our lives in such a way that any day could be our last on this world, which indeed it could, apocalypse or no. And we should always try to treat other people as we would want to be treated. I'm not perfect, but nor am I evil. I'm a normal, average person who has simply become aware of the man behind the curtain, and Toto and I would like you folks to have a look at the truth. So, number 2, black and white. Unlike the Republican and Democrat, black and white is an obvious difference between people, which is indeed mainly superficial. Humans are humans regardless of race, skin color, or creed, and we should not allow the overdramatic propaganda drilled into our minds by the idiot box and the Rockefeller Rothschild pre-funded activist groups designed to portray fabricated divisions between, quote, blacks and whites. There has been a great deal of disparity between the races throughout the history of America, but really we've totally changed the landscape in terms of much of the inequality, although we still have a long way to go. Agreed. Now, to give you an example, a black male is indeed far more likely to be arrested for any given crime or suspicion thereof, founded in reality or not be damned, just as they are far more likely to be jailed for longer sentences for comparable crimes committed by a white person. Now, there are definitely some societal disadvantages to being black in America, and I think I would be irresponsible if I said there were not. I think such things are despicable. I've seen how the welfare laws were created, a situation that makes it very difficult for black families, especially the very poor, to raise children in a household with the mother and father both present. Now, this may sound a bit callous of me, but if you put yourself in a situation where you are relying on the government to provide basic necessities for you, such as food, then that government has you right where they want you. They can manipulate every move of your life, including who lives with you, including the father of your own children, lest they take away your basic necessities. Now, it's a shame. I agree, it's a shame. But, for example, if a woman with 2 kids has the father living in the home with her, then she wouldn't be able to get certain benefits provided by the communist face of the modern fascist dictatorship we call America. Now, this is a cruel method employed by the elites. However, it's created a situation where alarming numbers of black families have started a generational pattern of children growing up in a home without the father in their life. Okay, this is not the natural order of things. This is against nature. People are supposed to live in a family unit and help each other raise their children, like in a tribe situation. You're not supposed to create a situation where you have a generational pattern of basically broken families. It spawns, the worst kind of people, and I'm not just saying blacks. It happens to whites too. If you grow up in a family without both parents, you're far more likely to essentially fail in life and revert to crime. It's just a statistical fact. You could argue that it's up to the individual to make something of themselves and get off the welfare, but whomever makes that statement has obviously never been poor. If you cannot afford the education that was handed to you on a silver platter, or even the shoes and a new suit for the big interview, or even the food to eat the night before so you can sleep well to do the interview. Indeed, there is a great deal of manipulation done that is certainly discriminatory against blacks, but where are the harsh condemnings of the Freemasons like Al Sharpton and the like, where the NAACP will go after anyone suspected of voicing a derogatory opinion, but will simply allow the terrible atrocities committed on their people day after day after day by the federal government that I've just pointed to. But let's not forget, this is not just a black thing. I've been arrested, I've been to jail, I've had my constitutional rights violated by servants of the people for absolutely no reason while I was still a minor attending school, federal school system, OMDAF, in 1997.
Cover now. Go. We're here. Hit it. I got high. Front door's open. I'll get it. I got it, Jeff. I'm gonna go to the left side. Police department, search warrant! Police department, search warrant! Ah, hey, fuck! Coming through, fire! Go! Police department, search warrant! Get down here! With you! Need one! With you!
Okay, just relax, okay?
One of them trying to couch there.
Up, hun. Get up. On top of your head. Put your hands on top of your head.
Get female right here. Cover me.
I got it. We need one in the back.
Need one.
I'll take your bike a little bit. Got one here. Need one in here.
Over 100 people at my high school were arrested during class in a major coordinated sting operation during the final week of exams in my junior year in high school. Now, because, and not to go off on a tangent, but because I missed the final exams that year, I was expelled from school for being arrested by the police. Now, so that caused me to fail my junior year with an otherwise decent GPA of 3.5, and thought my life was essentially finished before I even turned 17 years old. Now, this isn't a poor me story. Sure, I could have totally withdrawn from life because of what these strange men in masks had done to me and many of my friends when we were just kids. I really could have rebelled against life at that point and just become another statistic of loser expelled, do nothing for the rest of my life. But, it's my life to live, it's not theirs. So I was given an opportunity to try and catch up with my class by attending an accelerated school program designed to give derelict, loser, expellees, and dropouts the opportunity to get all of their federal high schooling credits in a compressed format over the course of 3 months per year. So I'm happy to say that I actually completed my junior and senior year of high school in the course of 3 months, a record for the accelerated program, which was, designed for loser derelicts. And I ended up attending college when I was only 17, a full year earlier than I would have if I had not gone through the sting operation. So, why was I arrested? If you're curious, my siblings sold drugs to an undercover police officer like 4 different times over the course of several months. And since we shared a bedroom at the time, the police kicked in our door. I was in class, just like I was supposed to be. This single ecstasy pill in a joint they found under my bed was reason enough to pull me out of class during the week of final exams and arrest me like a rapist or a burglar, throw me in jail, kick in my door at the house that I didn't even own when I was just a kid, and essentially ruin all of my plans for my future in my life. Or so they thought. That's what they thought they did. In all actuality, all they had really done is accelerate my plans for life, as I had planned on attending college as a music major for many years prior to that, and I did that anyways. So the point is, the program that I used to get through 2 years of high school in just 3 months was available to anyone who qualified and signed up for it. I didn't have to be white. As a matter of fact, most of the students there were African American. So when we see things on TV that make us get really steamed, really angry, and really wanting to hurt someone, please just think it through a little bit, because you really cannot believe everything you see on the idiot box. Regardless of your color, try to rationalize what they're showing you and compare it to your real experiences in your real life. We can no longer be led by the nose down propaganda lane by uber-rich, secretive fuckerheads who want us fighting amongst one another, when we should be directing our angst and scrutiny towards them, the ones who caused all this shit you are mad about in the first place. I will add that during the course of my life, I was held up at gunpoint while closing down a restaurant one Thursday evening. The 4 men that came in through the back doors with TAC-9 semi-automatic guns were all African-American men, but to be very honest with you, none of those criminals hurt me nearly as bad as the federal government did that day when I was expelled from school and arrested. So, number 3, rich and poor. Rich and poor is one of the most ironic and laughable dialectics perpetrated on the masses. There sure are a lot of rich people and a lot of poor people, but there are quite a few people who think they're really rich, but really, in the grand scheme of things, they're not at all. Think about it this way. About 0.1% of the population hold somewhere ridiculous like 90% of the world's wealth. We're not just talking about cash money, but real property, businesses, real assets of the world that give the currency its value. There is no point in having currency without first having items of value, which need to be quantified and evaluated in some form of moderation, which comes in the form of currency. Currency has transformed through the ages from everything from tallywood, which is literally just notches in a stick, to gold and specific types of shells. I mean, you can use just about anything as a currency. Indeed, the U.S. currency was once based on an amount of gold, which meant the currency itself was inherently tied to the value of an apparently valuable substance, which is not easily reproduced or unearthed. Having the currency tied to gold was an excellent way to make sure that the value of the currency was stable. You see, you cannot simply create wealth out of thin air, just like you cannot simply create gold out of thin air. Wealth is simply a valuation of all sorts of products or services, and is designed by societies over the years to ensure that anyone with skills, services, or goods of value can trade their services or goods for a fair price. You can imagine a time during a barter system without cash. People would trade live chickens for services rendered by a physician. So you can sort of see the problems without cash that can arise if something costs, say, a chicken and a half. So in order to have a functional, fair society, cash or currency is inherently necessary, not the root of all evil. It's the greed or the lust after cash or the spells put on the cash which make people lust after cash. So what happens if a secretive group of greedy, manipulative people gain control over the systems of managing the wealth of a nation? Do you think there would be room for corruption or bribery or blackmail or overall bullshittery? Do you think those who are indeed in control of our monetary system would want the average person to know that they were being scammed? No. Such hypothetical people would never want the masses, who outnumber them over 100,000 to 1, getting wise to their scheme, and would prefer to have the masses fighting against one another for the table scraps left over from their infernal, deceptive devouring of the economy, creating a situation where the average person is literally a slave to the corporate masters and a slave to their own debt, without knowing it, and in many cases even caring that it's true. The Federal Reserve Bank is about as federal as McDonald's. It's a private bank that was put together in the early years of the 20th century in secret by a small group of crafty, deceitful Freemasons. But we'll get into this particular story in a bit. Suffice to say for now, most of the people in the U.S. who think themselves to be rich, or at least upper middle class, are indeed slaves to a debt system and are by definition poor. The debt system was designed to make all people worship a worthless fiat currency while siphoning real wealth away from the entire world, while everyone gets up and goes to work every day and ponders about all the other people in the world who are so, quote, unlike themselves. It's amazing to them how anyone could be so far out of line in their views of the topics pressed into their minds by the opinion factories known as the mass media outlets or the programming. These people who think they are rich because they have a six-figure income and don't need to worry about things like paying their bills on time or eating or providing for their families, they think they're rich because they have so many pieces of worthless paper they couldn't even begin to try spending it all during 10 lifetimes. But those people, even them with the $1 million mansions and the yachts, many of them are indeed destitute by the standards of the true rich, or destitute by the standards of the spiritually rich. But if we're talking monetary, take a look at the royal Windsor family. It's estimated that the Queen of England is worth around $500 million cash assets and receives an annual salary of almost $13 million per year. Her humble home, the Royal Palace, is worth over $5 billion with a B. So just those assets alone, and those are really just scratching the surface if you want the truth, total out to about $6 billion easy on any old day of the week. And that's just one woman. And she's never done shit. I don't even think she could make a sandwich. The Walton family, the owners of Walmart, 6 people are worth almost $150 billion with a B dollars. Now, there's plenty of oil tycoons like the Bush family who are worth tens of billions, but $150 billion between 6 people? And you know there's people that go to sleep every night in the United States underfed, and those people work for a living very hard. How ironic. So these people are really no different than an average person. We're talking about the Waltons and the royal family, except for one major common denominator. Most of these people were born into families who were sly and cunning enough to accrue vast amounts of wealth above and beyond their average neighbor. Since wealth is the tallying system for fair trade, if you see vast sums of wealth being stored in one single place, that, by definition, that something unfair has gone on somewhere. All you capitalists out there will start howling at the moon when you hear this, but indeed profit cannot be made without someone somewhere along the line getting shitted. Okay? As unpleasant as it seems to your beloved capitalism, when greed and greed alone run a society, you have a world where the greedy prevail and honest, generous people around the world are trampled upon systemically. So if I can buy 100 apples at a penny apiece, then I turn around and sell each apple for $1, I'm a good capitalist, or am I a dishonest person? Well, you'd say that I have to pay people to grow the apples, pay for the seeds and the water, pay for the harvest and the distribution, but what is left over at the end of all that is the motivation for all corporations, the profit margin. So the owners of Walmart, the Walton family, not the ones from Walton's Mountain, to be sure, have become experts at capitalism and are hailed by all the esteemed men of the world as good businessmen and a successful model. Buy low and sell high. The underlying primary responsibility for any good corporate citizen. And if anything stands in the way of that profit margin, or even stands in the way of its annual increase in its profit, well, let's just say, never get in between a good capitalist and their profit margin, because they've made shitting people a science. Unbridled capitalism is what causes things like the energy crisis and $3+ gallon gas. Did you know that a man named Tom Ogle invented a modification to the carburetor of your standard internal combustion vehicles, which could allow such cars to receive a simple adjustment to the fuel system, and it would allow that car to run on nothing more than water vapors? The internal combustion engine is essentially the explosion of gases compressed within a chamber, and the forces caused by the compression and decompression are what generate the energy needed to push the car. Automobiles, up until Tom Ogle's invention, who he actually sort of piggybacked on the work of a man named Charles Nenson Pogue, you can look up the Winnipeg carburetor, always needed to use gas vapors in order for the combustion process to work optimally. Now, Ogle found that you can actually use any vapor, including water vapor, just simply by doing some modifications to the carburetor. This is fairly amazing, and you'd think that the auto manufacturers of the world would have been drooling over this, and we'd have lots of cars running on water by now, since his invention was in the 1960s. Indeed, you would think that the auto manufacturers would be chomping at the bits for this invention, but what actually happened was Tom Ogle was murdered and found dead in the trunk of one of his cars, and apparently due to suicide. Now, from what I gather, Tom Ogle wanted to ensure that his invention was going to be used for the benefit of all people. Sort of rings true with Nikola Tesla, sort of what he wanted to do with his energy devices. But Tom Ogle wanted his invention to benefit all people, and he refused to sell the patents of his work to the big bad automobile manufacturers, who offered him all sorts of seemingly attractive deals for the rights to his intellectual property, but he held out. Now, I believe it was GM who ultimately got their hands on Tom Ogle's proprietary technology, but what happened to the invention? Where are all the cars running on water vapors? And why are we still drilling for oil, going to war for oil, fucking up our seas for oil, our oceans are fucked up for oil, the coastlines and the wildlife, all that for black gold, which everyone knows is toxic to the environment, increasingly expensive as it gets harder and harder to find? Well, the short answer is capitalism. If you can imagine, one of the major moneymakers of the United States of all time were the Rothschilds, underlings known as the Rockefellers. They owned a company called Standard Oil, which was essentially disbanded in 1911 because it was an illegal monopoly. You see, in a free society with an open market, you simply cannot have one group of people holding all the wealth. It snuffs out the chance for competition, which leaves the enterprise in question as stagnant, and nothing will ever improve, and prices can only get worse. They can charge whatever they want to charge for a product such as oil, which is a growing, booming country such as the US was in those days, can thrive and survive only with oil. The laughable solution to the monopoly of Standard Oil, however, was to disband it into several different companies, including many of the major few gas stations you'll find on any town USA. So they really didn't get rid of Standard Oil, they just made a bunch of little Standard Oils. So it's also worth mentioning that Standard Oil was one of the first steps towards, quote, globalization, or I should say world markets, because they were producing far more oil than the demand called for by the US. And so instead of stockpiling oil and lowering the prices as they should have, they created scarcity by exporting those goods to China and other nations. Now, in a world full of worldwide trade and distribution, it might sound like a weird, crazy concept. However, our nation, America, was founded as an isolationist country wherein everything you bought in America was produced for and by Americans. Now, just going back to Tom Ogle for a second, we have all this hype around chemtrails. It used to be if you saw a plane flying through the sky, you would see, a trail of smoke coming out the back of the plane, and then that trail of fumes would soon dissipate, maybe, a few thousand feet behind the plane. Well, nowadays we see all these clouds coming out of the backs of planes, and we have all this hype about, it's aluminum, it's toxins, they're trying to, indoctrinate us or inoculate us, or all these different theories about all these chemicals that they're spraying all over themselves as well as us. Don't you think it makes a lot more sense that the big military-industrial complex connected airplane manufacturers and their subsidiaries, the airlines, have simply fitted their carburetors with Tom Ogle's device, which allows the jet engines to run on water vapors? This makes a lot more sense to me that the clouds we're seeing coming out of the backs of planes are just that, clouds, because the only byproduct of the car running on water is water vapors or clouds.
There is a growing citizens movement demanding an explanation of chemtrails.
And I talked to my NSA buddies at Fort Carson, Peterson Air Force Base, and Buckley, where I was actually their doctor taking care of the pilots flying and spraying the chemtrails. So I know it's real. If anybody says it's not real, they're full of it.
So all this fear and all this testing the muck for aluminum and saying that the water has aluminum is pseudoscience. So the Federal Reserve was set up in secret in 1913 by a group of Freemasonic congressmen who called a secret meeting on Jekyll Island, Georgia, during the Christmas vacation while all the other good little congressmen were at home with their families wrapping Christmas presents from Santa. The Federal Reserve Act was supposedly drafted to secure the dollar and prevent a problem known as inflation. Inflation is basically the value of our currency dropping and is a direct result of too much currency in the market. This doesn't make sense to the average person. People say, well, isn't more money good? No, more money is not good. But the reason this doesn't make sense to the average person is because they've never really thought about it. Most people think that economics is this highly complex, super sophisticated process which is closely monitored and patrolled by the government. Nothing could be further from the truth. In truth, the government is subservient to the Federal Reserve. In truth, since the 100 years since the Federal Reserve was put into place, our currency has devalued to inflation, which the Fed was supposed to prevent, remember, to the point where a dollar is literally worth less than a penny of its original value prior to 1913, and has done nothing but fall since the creation of the Fed, and of course pulling the dollar from the gold standard in the 40s. By definition, the Fed has failed, but that isn't the only reason. It's a terrible organization. Our very country was founded by men, mostly Freemasons, granted, who were, however, vehemently opposed to the banks controlling the laws of the land by keeping a hold of the purse strings. People like Andrew Jackson knew the deal. He knew that these big money lenders love to lend their money to the governments because the governments can use their people as collateral, while people can really only use their property as collateral, but the property is never really owned by the people. Now, Andrew Jackson's famous last words on his deathbed as a dying man were, and I quote, "I killed the bank," as his most, prized accomplishment of his life. So, what is so wrong and evil about the bank? If you haven't figured it out by now, the banks are the reason so much wealth can be accrued by people and entities such as Walmart and the Royal Family Neither one of these groups have done enough work to create or created enough goods to honestly deserve such vast amounts of wealth. Truly, not that much wealth even exists in this world. However, the illusion of such wealth has been craftily forced upon us, and we play along with the illusion as if it were always this way. The Fed basically invents money out of thin air and loans it to our government at interest. And again, we'll get into this in a bit, but we've still got several dichotomies to cover before we get into the meat of the matter, so we'll come back to that. So the number 4 dichotomy is the civilian/official. So you've got your civilians and your federal officials who are supposed to be the servants in this equation. Ah, yes, amongst the most powerful and effective dichotomy of all, the suit, the badge, and the gun. People are creatures of visualization. If you put a man in front of a crowd to tell them about something scientific, such as sodium fluoride, a poison, being good for your teeth, they will not trust you or respect the authority of that person's arguments or assertions if he's wearing jeans and a t-shirt. But put that same man in a white lab coat, a white trench coat, and the same crowd of people will see him as an authority on science and assume that his assertions or arguments are far more believable or factual than the same guy wearing jeans and a t-shirt. So this very subtle difference, and many of these can be pointed to, but these subtle differences in the way in which ideas are presented to us have a profound, many times unseen effect by the people sitting in the audience being controlled. We see a police officer wearing a badge, all spiffy and shiny shoes and shirt all tucked in, and we're programmed to assume that that person is a wholesome figure of authority and has far more rights and privileges than me or you, the average person. I'll give you a few examples. Have you ever been pulled over for speeding? If you're doing, say, 45 and a 25, that's speeding pretty bad. But the police officer who pulled you over, well, he must have been doing 60 to get you, right? Because you passed by him and yet he somehow caught up with you. So who's supposed to pull him over? You were only doing 45, he was doing 60, so I don't suppose anyone has ever received a speeding ticket remembers the officer who pulled them over quickly being given a good talking to by internal affairs, who did 85 miles an hour behind to catch up with him, right? And so after that, the federal agent who did 100 to catch him, I mean, at what point do they get it? If there are laws for people's safety to only drive 25 miles per hour on a specific road, then what gives a police officer the right to do 60 in order to punish you for doing 45? Police officers and judges in general are the definition of hypocrites, and no amount of badges or uniforms gives them any true authority on this world. Indeed, they are perceived by the masses to have such authority, and so, thanks to the programming, such authority they are handed on a silver platter and with a side of donuts and coffee. Most of the police are corrupt, and this is an obvious, verifiable fact. If you study the topic, you'll find that only certain types of people are allowed to be police officers. I'm going to make some broad generalizations here, but for the sake of argument, I realize there are probably a few decent people out there who happen to be police officers, but it doesn't change the fact that they are hypocritical and do not have any authority over any other person, period. So if you apply to become a police officer, they will not allow you to join the force based on assessments of your intelligence, and they also screen for psychopathic tendencies, but not in such a way that you think. In other words, there's no signpost that says, must be this smart to be an officer, or no psychos allowed. It's indeed the opposite of that. So if you score too highly on the intelligence assessment, they will disallow you from joining, or you'll be overqualified. Furthermore, if certain personality traits are not prevalent, for example, following the herd and not thinking critically will be a big plus for anyone signing up for the police academy. But if you've got psychopathic tendencies, shoo you right in. So a police officer can literally murder a person for no reason, and they will be given preferential treatment, to put it very mildly. I've seen people fired from their job for showing up a few minutes late. I've seen people fired from their job for making too many mistakes. But could you imagine a job where you could literally murder someone on the clock and then get 2 weeks off with pay and ultimately acquitted most of the time? This is insane, to be very honest with you, since the police and all elected government officials are supposed to be our servants and not our masters. Indeed, the police and the military are serving and protecting a group of people, but that group of people is not you and I. The police are just normal people, well, below average intelligence by definition, and given an ounce of power over their fellow people, but only superficial power, not true authority. The police are trained that they have the right to beat the shit out of someone for no reason, and place them in handcuffs and lock them away. A piece of paper sitting in a vault somewhere in Washington, D.C., or possibly the Vatican, seriously, it's possible, might say the police have a right to do this, but it does not make it so. Just because the federal government writes something down and states it is law does not make it law. Only if you subscribe to their system and agree to their terms do they actually have this type of power. Since the vast majority of the nation has been lulled into agreeing with the terms under duress and under hypnosis, we've allowed our servants to become our masters, and they are serving the secret hidden master who has so cleverly hidden his proverbial fingerprints in plain sight for anyone initiated to see. They find this amusing, showing us their plans and how exactly they're controlling us. It's a game to them, and it's sort of an unwritten rule. Like a vampire needs your permission to enter your house. So too, this secretive, super-rich elite group nestled in the upper echelons of society, locked high and away in their ivory towers, lording above the common slaves who think they are free, they have robbed us blind for anything of true value or true worth, including the very homes in which we dwell, as well as our security and even, finally, our dignity. We've allowed them to take so much control over our daily lives that we don't even see what they are doing to keep us in chains. Not literal chains, but chains of the mind, which are unfortunately much stronger than any steel you can hammer on an anvil. The corrections officers of the world get up and go to work every day, worried about their bills just like everyone else. They brush their teeth at night, put on their pants in the morning, just like everyone else. But a piece of paper sitting in a vaulted Washington gives them carte blanche authority to lock you in chains and beat the shit out of you for no reason. And we all blindly consent to their power by simply standing by and doing nothing. And let's not forget the prisons for profit. The taxpayers of the country spend something like $50,000 a year to take care of each inmate. Now, the last time I've checked, and yes, I've been to jail, you get exactly 1 orange jumpsuit, 1 towel, if you're lucky, 1 pair of plastic slippers, 1 small glass of barely sweet Kool-Aid with each meal. Each meal consists of roughly 1 piece of bread, 1 egg, and perhaps 1 small slice of meat, if you're lucky. If you've never been to jail, you truly cannot appreciate the worst food in the world. Truly, I don't care what your least favorite food is, no matter what the food served in jail happens to be that day, it's going to be the worst than dog shit scraped from the bottom of your boot, I can assure you. 1 shower per day, if you're lucky, 1 small tube of toothpaste per month, courtesy of Bob Barker, the uber-rich host of Price is Right, 1 small generic toothbrush, courtesy of Bob Barker, 1 cot, 1 itchy wool blanket, 1 sheet, and a half a toilet and a half a sink. Since most cells are shared by 2 people, it's not even a whole toilet and a sink, but really this doesn't even count because, keep in mind, the toilet and sink are stainless steel built into the wall of the facility itself. So we're not talking about some new toilet every time someone goes to jail. It's not some expensive toilet that needs to be replaced or repaired every few years. It is a hunk of metal fastened to the wall. We're talking about a permanent tiger tank of a toilet that was figured into the cost of the building itself. So it really cannot even be tallied into the expense per inmate. Certainly not per inmate per year. Honestly, there might be 1 or 2 things I'm forgetting, but that list just about sums up the costs involved with any inmate upon arriving in prison and basically the upkeep of that inmate. I'm really not exaggerating when I tell you I could probably purchase similar items retail for well under $100 a month. In truth, since the prisons get everything in bulk plus subsidies from the government, I would honestly evaluate the actual costs involved with jailing a person on a monthly basis at well under $250 a month. And that's being very generous to them. And that's giving them extra stuff, like even extra cakes. That includes everything that the person receives as their standard care package, courtesy Uncle Sam, aka the taxpayers. To be safe, and I have a round even number, we'll say it would cost me $250 a month or $3,000 per year to care for each prisoner, given the same quality and treatment afforded to them by the state. So where's the other $47,000 going that the taxpayers are paying to the state for each prisoner, since it's $50,000 a year on average per inmate? Do we smell someone profiting from imprisoning the people of the United States? Indeed. So profitable, in fact, that there are now private corporations who are chartered specifically to profit from jailing the people. The scary thing is, these people are lining the pockets, aka lobbying our politicians to ensure they get better deals and can build bigger, quote, better prisons, but also more stringent laws with stricter penalties to ensure increasing annual growth. When you begin to see dollar signs or giant chicken legs every time you see a person getting arrested, there's something terribly wrong with you, and you should be evaluated for mental treatment. You should certainly not be getting rewarded with millions of dollars per year. If you aren't mad about the ways in which we're manipulated yet, then you possibly do not possess the ability to experience emotions. Our country is a dilapidated shell of its former self, where the officials appear to the casual observer as to be doing a good job and a good service to the community. In truth, they are anti-constitutional, fascist Nazis who honestly think a piece of paper sitting in a vault in Washington gives them some authority to arrest another sovereign, innocent human being and lock them in a terrible place so their masters can profit from it. You realize it's not the inmate forking over the dough, it's you and me, the taxpayers, who stand idly by like a woman being raped by a stranger, asking him to please hurry up and finish so we can make our 8 o'clock appointment with Pat Sajak and Vanna White. Number 5, gay and straight. Another polarizing topic that's really been laid on thick here lately in the last couple of weeks by the idiot box.
The attention of the Internal Revenue Service. As a result, on April the 11th, 1988, the Franklin Credit Union was raided and closed by the FBI. King was arrested, and a federal investigation showed he'd stolen $40 million from Franklin. But the FBI's inquiries were secret, and evidence of King's sex ring was quickly covered up. In November 1988, Nebraska's state government set up a parallel investigation into the Franklin financial collapse. A legislative committee was formed. Its chairman was the Republican head of Nebraska's banking committee, corn farmer and state senator Lawrence Schmidt. But the money trail led quickly to the original allegations of child abuse, and almost immediately anonymous threats began.
I received a phone call on the floor of the legislature. The caller did not identify himself, but he said, "Lauren, you do not want to have an investigation of the Franklin Federal Credit Union." And I asked who I was speaking to, and they said, "That doesn't matter, but you shouldn't have that investigation." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "It will reach to the highest levels of the Republican Party."
Being gay is not a life choice or even something we're born with. I've known several gay people in my life, and I don't really have anything against them, to be very honest, but of all the gay people I've known in my life, all of them had some sort of horror in their past which had ultimately caused them to choose that path. It's a path of perversity, giving in to one's own weird, perverted desires. Homosexuality is unnatural and is not a way in which normal, rational people should act. I'm not going to sit here and say gay is bad because the Bible says so, which it does, but to me, it's just self-evident. It's perverted. Now, I believe that most of the gay people I've known were repulsed by the opposite sex due to, a fondling uncle or a grabby granny, but not because they were born that way. Now, thanks to the mass media machine, the fondling uncle and the grabby granny have an opportunity to take a crack at your child's mind. If you're one of the parents that buys your child all the Disney movies and the trendy big budget cartoon movies of the day, you can thank yourself if you wound up with a homosexual child with all kinds of hang-ups, but you can never figure out why. Before the perverted capitalists who control the media today were in power, sure, you had perverse homosexuality in the world, hell, even back into biblical times, but never in such numbers and blatant flaunting as we see in America today, especially after the recent decisions to legalize gay marriage in all 50 states. Again, this falls back to something being on a piece of paper. The decision of 5 single people in the world, and we're all around 300 million in the US of us supposed to concur, since 5 people sitting there in black robes agreed to this abomination, the natural world, this is marriage? No. If 2 men want to live together and file taxes jointly and do all sorts of weird things together, there's nothing I can do to stop them, and frankly, I really don't care enough what those perverse individuals do with their time or with their private parts. It's none of my business. Just like what I do with my wife behind closed doors is none of their business. But all of the shameful vices in the world, homosexuality has become the rampant norm in our culture, due in large part to the incremental manufacturing of consent by the mass media, subliminally and blatantly, slowly over the years, until now when it's in your face. There's no possible way to look the other way, if only for a moment to catch your breath. Barack Obama is obviously homosexual, since he's obviously married to a man named Michael, who has the physique of a linebacker and the Adam's apple of a basketball star.
Ms. Rivers, how are you? You made a ton of news officiating the wedding in New York yesterday. Is this like a new cottage career move for you?
I'm so excited.
Okay.
And I should do very well because I don't charge.
And do you think that the country will see the United States will see the first gay president or the first woman
we
president?
already have it with Obama, so let's just calm down.
Got it.
You know Michelle is a
I'm sorry, she's a what?
a transgender. We all know.
Oh my gosh.
Oh gosh. It's okay. She doesn't.
Secretary Panetta, thank you for your introduction and for your extraordinary leadership. To members of Congress, Vice President Biden, members of the Joint Chiefs, service secretaries, distinguished guests, and men and women of the finest military in the world. And most of all, Admiral Mullen, Deborah, Michael and I also want to acknowledge your son Jack, who's deployed today. All of you have performed extraordinary service to our country.
Okay, so all these people going out and being pridefully gay, and Obama signing it into law is a closet. He's in the closet, right? So he can't even live up to his own self. He'll never admit it.
You know, you're talking about subliminal messages and hidden images in Disney films. So the most infamous is the penis-shaped tower on the VHS cover of The Little Mermaid. But I'll bet you didn't see the other cock hidden on that box. Guess what? It's on the crab. And people will tell you the priest in The Little Mermaid, he had a boner. But how did everyone miss Dumbo's dick? The Lion King, you know, it spells sex in the sky. You know, that's debatable. But check out just a few frames later. You know, is that debatable? You know, there's no two ways about it. Disney's hiding dicks in their flicks. And most people don't catch them. It's very subtle the way they sneak them in. And in every single Disney movie, I'm finding dicks. You know, Peter Pan, 101 Dalmatians. The Fox and the Hound, more like 3 cocks on the ground. And you have to wonder who's drawing all these dicks.
I was an animator at Disney for a lot of years. Dickhead animator. I was in charge of drawing the top part of the dicks. My first gig was Tarzan animated feature. So I'm sitting there one day and the boss comes in and he says, "Hey, I need you to draw something for me." I said, "What do you need me to draw?" He says, "Tarzan's dick." And I said, "What?" He says, "I need you to draw Tarzan's dick for me." I said, "That's not my job." He says, "I don't care. That's your job now, or else you don't have a job." I still don't know why to this day they want me to draw dicks, but I guess...
Ongoing process. So long as there's dicks in Disney movies, I'm not gonna stop until I've seen every dick.
Slowly but surely, the perverted old Uncle Disney has crept into our homes and showed little girls and boys all sorts of interesting things, including perversion, bestiality, murder, Luciferianism, occult pagan rituals and worship, and on and on and on. We wonder why our world is so rampant with every imaginable form of wickedness and debauchery. It's no accident. This is all going according to their plans, and the mindless, brainwashed sheeple think it's just great. Two dudes can now get married. Firstly, what fucking difference does it make? Neil and Bob were sucking each other off yesterday. Now they're sucking each other off in the middle of the street where everyone's children can see them. I've been married for almost 15 years, but I can't remember ever a time wanting the world to know what goes on behind closed doors in our bedroom. It's really none of anyone's business, and people think anyone truly gives a shit about this weird perversion, has an overinflated ego, and are trying to compensate for their obviously troubled and confused and deluded mind by shouting at the rooftops all the perverse and unspeakable things they enjoy with their, quote, partner. What are you people going to do one day when a man decides to marry his pet goat? Marriage is by definition between a man and a woman. If you create precedents for gray areas in this definition, it's only a matter of time before the entire institution of marriage is desecrated and trampled upon by every billy goat fucker and gerbil into ass inserter from here to Timbuktu. Number 6, pro-life and pro-choice. This is a great example of how normal people who agree on just about everything else can be divided into two fiercely opposed camps. The word pro-life is pretty accurate. However, pro-choice is misleading to the dichotomy, which people must be misled into, jumping on board with to this camp. I mean, not too many people would want to self-identify with the group labeled as the pro-dead babies. Sure, there are a few knucking futs out there who would like to be a part of that group, but certainly not the Republican soccer mom or the executive who wants to portray himself as this hip person with consideration for women's rights and their right to choose. With all due respect, choice is a word reserved for what goes on your pizza. Choice is something that we can decide on, depending on personal preference. Choice is not a word that accurately describes an irresponsible woman's right to kill her unborn child after drinking too much one night at the bar and falling for the same old pickup line, just like she usually does. I'm not trying to be insensitive here, as I realize there certainly are situations where a woman was, raped and did not have a choice in the matter. I could understand that woman wanting to be rid of that child, although I would still urge her to reconsider. But I think she should have a choice, granted. At the same time, if a woman can't keep her legs closed after a few drinks and a smooth-talking horn dog, then perhaps, if she had to live with her consequences, then maybe we'd have a slightly more responsible society. What do you think happens to a woman who gets an abortion because it just wasn't convenient to have the baby, or the guy turned out to be an asshole? There's a lot of asshole guys out there. So what do you expect? You met him in a bar, you fucked him on the way home without even knowing his name yet. Geez, lady. Okay, so it is indeed consequences for our actions that ultimately teach us lessons, and without such consequences, we will forever remain children, looking for a shortcut way out of our responsibilities, which we indeed brought upon ourselves with our own actions in most cases. I've always been pro-life, just as everyone should be pro-life. How can you possibly be pro-choice or pro-dead baby to hold the opinion in the first place? For starters, the correct terminology is indeed pro-dead baby, so don't sugarcoat it. But regardless of how you do sugarcoat the name of it, had your parents been pro-choice, perhaps your smug little ass wouldn't be around to voice your opinion, now would you? So you're definitely pro-life when it comes to me, but if it's someone else, some baby you've never met, then you're pro-choice, or better called pro-dead baby, because you want to appear trendy and cool and hip and sensitive to people's, choice, just like the people on the TV told you to feel. The opinion factories known as the 24-hour news networks play no small part in the deceiving and dumbing down of the general population. Number 7, Pepsi or Coke? This particular dichotomy might not seem like a polarizing dividing dialectic device, although truly, the reason I'm mentioning the Coke-Pepsi dichotomy is to show a point. Believe it or not, there are people in this world who have somehow been seduced or brainwashed into being fanatics of either Pepsi or Coke. These people are extremely passionate about their Coke products or Pepsi products. They will spend thousands of dollars per year on sugar water and also purchase the upgraded paraphernalia, the promotional items, the collector's items from Coke or Pepsi. Just, let's say for argument's sake, we're talking about a Coke fanatic. Okay, so Coca-Cola is a brand name for a secret formula of sugar water, which was originally brewed with, get this, cocaine, as one of its secret, addictive, proprietary ingredients. I have indeed done cocaine before, and it's certainly not a drug for lightweights. Cocaine is one of the strongest stimulants you can find. It's naturally occurring in concentrated forms in the coca leaf. Highly addictive, cocaine is the primary ingredient in crack cocaine and is also used in different forms as localized anesthetic. If you've ever had a tooth pulled, the numbing effect of the drug is a reaction done to the body by a derivative of cocaine, Novocaine, same thing. So Coca-Cola and their sugar water is a wonder drug. Originally a wonder drug, that's how they advertised it, as most of the soft drinks of the time were actually invented to perform one medical function or another, or at least that's how they were advertised. But indeed, Coca-Cola had originally used cocaine in the soda pop. So now, back to the fanatic. They did take the cocaine out, I think it was in the 60s or 70s, but blind taste studies show that your average person, or even a fanatic of Coke, cannot tell the difference between Coke and Pepsi in a blind study. So the two soft drinks, Coke and Pepsi, have identical ingredients and taste virtually identical. So why would the fanatic of one who can't tell the difference between the two love Coke so much but hate Pepsi? Well, it all has to do with the associations of the product and the label on it, which were crafted by master psychologists and salesmen into the mind of the consumer at a very young age. So the fanatic doesn't like the taste of the drink better. They've actually been mind-controlled into associating that product as better than Pepsi. And they will spend a small fortune over the span of their life on Coke products and memorabilia. People want to fit in with the rest of the herd, and they want to have joy and love in their life. So the advertisers have tricked this unwitting person into believing that by purchasing the Coca-Cola products, they will have a life full of love, enjoyment, and fulfillment, but only if they continue to buy Coke products. So I don't mean to pick on Coca-Cola, as I actually do prefer Coke over Pepsi, but since all the advertisers of the world are blasting us with similar product associations from the time we are very young children, to prove that I'm not that big a fan of Pepsi, to exclude them from this topic, I've heard it argued that Pepsi uses as one of its secret proprietary ingredients, even to this day, the dead cells of aborted fetuses. Now, I cannot confirm or deny whether this is actually true. I have done a little bit of research into it and found that it is definitely possibly true. Okay? So, the intellectual property laws of our uber-capitalist face of the power structure make it possible for corporations such as Pepsi to purchase the dead fetal cells of afterborn abortions and could legally put that into the drink ingredients, simply listed as other natural ingredients. They technically wouldn't be lying if this allegation were true, and no amount of public outcry would allow for any independent, unbiased party to look into the claims. Pepsi is protected by federal law, which states they can put whatever the fuck they want into the drinks, and nobody can stop them or even scrutinize their ingredients, since they are technically a trade secret. Now, other corporations such as Monsanto have made leaps and bounds in terms of covering up disgusting, morally reprehensible corporate actions which are technically legal. You see, large corporations such as Monsanto, and with the blessings of the elite power fuckers like the Bush family, can basically do whatever the hell they want and need not worry about suffering the consequences of their actions. In truth, how do you punish a corporate body? How do you punish a corporation? According to the new laws on the books of America, corporations are people, and money is free speech. If that's the case, why bother having elections at all? Why not just let Pepsi and Coke choose our president for us? And we can just hope they pick someone whom we like, and maybe we like their tie, or at least we like their smile. This type of system wouldn't be that far away from what we have right now, but at least then we'd know it was just a silly game to keep us entertained in the dichotomy. Number 8, Fox or MSN. This certainly plays into the Republican and Democrat dichotomy, but the news outlets of our modern world have done an excellent job tricking people into believing they represent the truth, but more importantly, they trick people into thinking they represent opposing views of the truth. So the news we watch is designed for a specific purpose, which is certainly not keeping us in touch with the real world around us. Indeed, the exact opposite is true. These news organizations are private businesses with only one responsibility, and that responsibility is to their shareholders, and more specifically to their primary shareholder. If you're not familiar with how publicly traded companies such as MSN or Fox work, here's a brief rundown. The press, as it was known during the days of the Constitution, was afforded special privileges as the unwritten fourth branch of government. You see, the government wasn't always viewed as this infallible, super-rich, omnipotent, omnipresent beacon of power and truth and freedom and unofficial, official stories like we believe today. No, it certainly was not. The government, until recent times, was viewed in America as a service to the people and to provide a very limited and very specific set of services. The founders of our nation believed, and rightfully so, that people are wise enough to handle their own affairs and do not need government telling them what to do. However, the government was necessary in certain degrees to perform certain functions as an unbiased party during a dispute, for an example. Our government was designed with inherent checks and balances, essentially to ensure that no one person or group became too powerful. Indeed, breaking free of a long-standing caste system where kings lorded over the commoners. If your dad was a shoemaker, you're a shoemaker. If your dad was a king, then you're a king. As if someone owed them a living. During the American Revolution, our forebears fought and died so that we could have a shot at being totally free of empirical dictatorship, which spoils rotten select few while trampling the rest into the ground with taxes and illegitimate authority over people in general. Our government was set up in such a way that taxing a man's wages was expressly forbidden, and a lawyer or solicitor could simply never become president. Of course, the slick lawyers and solicitors found a way to get around all that. So fast forward to 2015, where the only people who have a chance at an election are those with connections to the very secret societies with unlimited funding and full control over the mass media opinion factories. Is this starting to sink in yet? There were reasons to limit political contributions from private sources and banning contributions from corporations. You cannot allow money to run politics, or else those with the most money will always win. The reason we have not gotten hip to this system yet en masse is because we've all been tricked via the idiot box to believe we have a choice in this matter, via the ballot box. If your guy wins, then you're happy for a time until you realize he too was a worthless scumbag just like the other guy. Or you'll be very sad that your guy lost, but better luck next time since the guy you hated was obviously a worthless scumbag and we'll show them who's boss in the next election. What we've all failed to realize is that no matter who wins, it's going to be the guy who was backed by the super rich elites who control the power anyways. They just need a puppet whom we all really like to go around parading the dog and pony show, which is U.S. politics. Obama ran on ending the war in the Middle East and to get our country off of foreign oil.
For the first time in 9 years, there are no Americans fighting in Iraq. 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq. We did. 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq. I did. 4 years ago, I promised to end the war in Iraq, and I did. I told you we'd end the war in Iraq. We did. I said we'd end the Iraq war. We did. I told you I'd end the war in Iraq, and we did. I ended the war in Iraq as I promised. In 2008, I promised we'd end the war in Iraq. We've ended it. I was able to keep my promise and end the war in Iraq. In 2008, I promised we would end the war in Iraq, and we've ended it. The war in Iraq is over. The war in Iraq is over from ending the war in Iraq. That's why I ended the war in Iraq. For the first time in 9 years, there are no Americans fighting in Iraq.
President, do you have any second thoughts about pulling all ground troops out of Iraq?
You know what I just find interesting is the degree to which this issue keeps on coming up, as if this was my decision.
And he did exactly the opposite of this and was re-elected 4 years later. No surprise. Now, before Obama, we had Bush. The son of the other Bush, both Skull and Bonesmen, the secret society of Yale. Gog and Magog were their code names within that group, a fitting name for the Bush pair if you're familiar with biblical prophecy. Before Bush, we had Clinton, who is allegedly one of the biggest importers of cocaine and heroin into the U.S. via a little airstrip in Mena, Arkansas. If you've never seen the documentary The Clinton Murders, it's certainly worth a watch. Just to give you an idea, the Clintons were basically greedy backstabbers who were raised up to super rich status by preying on elderly investors and stealing their money and using sneaky clauses in their mortgages on property subsidized by the government, thanks to the Clintons' gubernatorial status. Bill and Hillary Clinton are possibly involved with at least 20 murders just while they were in Arkansas, in their early years.
On July the 16th, 1999, John F. Kennedy Jr. died with his family when their plane crashed into the Atlantic Ocean. The circumstances surrounding the crash continue to raise questions. Days before his death, Kennedy was declared a frontrunner for the New York Senate seat, putting him ahead of his rival, First Lady Hillary Clinton. After his death, she was elected senator for New York. Kennedy's name was added to a list circulating the internet. The list comprises over 50 names, with no connection to each other apart from the fact that all of them died mysteriously and all of them had connections to the Clintons. In most cases, the people on the list were poised to oppose or expose the Clintons shortly before they died. The list is known as the Clinton body count, and conspiracy theorists believe it is damning evidence of an extensive cover-up of crimes committed by America's most powerful political couple. Is it possible that Bill and Hillary Clinton's rise to power was facilitated by brutally eliminating the competition? Not all the names on the list are as illustrious as JFK Jr. Many of them are former bodyguards of President Clinton who were killed in helicopter crashes or by apparent suicide. One name on the list that stands out is Mary Mahoney. In July 1997, she was closing up a Starbucks when gunmen broke in and killed all the staff, including her. No money or other goods were taken from the shop. It bore all the hallmarks of an execution. Days before her death, the headlines had been dominated by a lawsuit brought against President Clinton by Paula Jones, a former Clinton employee who charged the president with sexual harassment. Newsweek reported that a former White House staffer with the initial M was going to give evidence against Clinton. Mary Mahoney had been a White House intern for Clinton in 1991. Conspiracy filmmaker Pat Matryoshkiana is one of many who believe Mahoney was murdered on the orders of Bill Clinton simply to protect his public image against Paula Jones. According to them, Jones was too publicly prominent to risk an assassination. Unfortunately for conspiracy theorists, a man called Carl Cooper confessed to the killing of Mahoney as a robbery gone wrong, and Monica Lewinsky came out to speak against the president's extramarital activities. Many critics of the body count list use examples like this to dispel the notion that the Clintons have been merrily murdering their way to the top for decades. So where does this list come from? The body count list apparently started with a lawyer named Linda Thompson. In April 1993, the tragedy of the Waco siege prompted her to compile and publish an early form of the list. Just a few months later, the list would gain its most prominent and compelling entry. On July 20th, 1993, Vince Foster was found dead in Fort Macy Park near Washington, D.C. He had been shot through the neck with his grandfather's pistol. Official investigations ruled that his death was a suicide. Foster was a close friend and colleague of First Lady Hillary Clinton. Unswervingly loyal to the president and his wife, he had supposedly helped to cover up dodgy real estate deals, unpaid taxes, and controversial staff sackings made before and during Bill Clinton's presidency.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
With his help, the Clintons survived the worst scandals of Bill's first term. By all accounts, he was a happy, decent, and dependable man. It therefore seemed strange that such a well-rounded, successful, and valuable member of Team Clinton should commit suicide. The public outcry led to an investigation by independent counsel Ken Starr. It was heavily criticized for postponing the publication of its results for over 3 years. Eventually, Starr confirmed the police's view that Vince Foster killed himself. However, investigator Hugh Sprunt had other ideas. Using the forensic evidence made available by police, Sprunt published his own report on Foster's death. He concluded that Foster had in fact been murdered. Sprunt highlighted several unusual aspects of the case to criticize the police's conclusions. For one thing, carpet fabric was found on Foster's clothes, suggesting he had lain down on a carpeted floor in his suit. Foster's glasses were found several meters from his body, apparently blown off by the gunshot. Yet the gun's trigger guard was wrapped around his thumb, as if it had been dropped on Foster's dead hand. Sprunt used these details to suggest that Foster had been killed somewhere else, and was carried to the park by a person or persons unknown, with his glasses falling off in the process and the murder weapon being planted on him. Sprunt says the suicide story was a cover-up. There wasn't even a suicide note to explain Foster's actions. That is, until after his funeral, when torn fragments of a note were found in his briefcase. This note was held by the White House for 30 hours before it was released to the police. Its most revealing and confounding phrase is a remark in Foster's handwriting which says, the public will never believe the innocence of the Clintons and their loyal staff. To conspiracy theorists, this is a clear signal from Foster that he was ready to turn against the Clintons and expose their wrongdoings to the American public. To the Clinton supporters, it is clear evidence that Foster was too depressed by political pressures and the scandals that rocked his close friends to cope with life any longer. Foster's death drew a lot of attention to the body count list, and its profile was boosted by the media, who reported on the many mysterious deaths surrounding the Clintons in publications like the Washington Post and Newsweek. On April 15, 1998, the New York Times revealed that coverage of these conspiracy theories had been promoted by Richard Mellon Scaife, a billionaire who funded a secret smear campaign against Clinton called the Arkansas Project. Scaife spent upwards of $2 million on the project, which was responsible for most of the revelations of Clinton's financial and sexual indiscretions, not all of which were proven.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
The project also deliberately encouraged, but carefully never endorsed, the theory that Clinton had arranged for Vince Foster to be murdered as part of a grand cover-up of his misdeeds. When Clinton ended his second term as president in 2001, he left the Oval Office under a cloud of controversy, yet with the highest approval rating of any American president since the Second World War. The body count list drifted into obscurity and ceased to add new names. Recently, with Hillary Clinton expected to run for the presidency in 2016, the body count list has seen a surge in promotion. Some conspiracy websites, like whatreallyhappened.com, have even started adding new names to the list. After first compiling the Clinton body count list in 1993, Linda Thompson founded the American Justice Federation, a pro-gun and pro-constitution activist group. She died in 2009 from an overdose of medication. She left the Clinton body count list to be shaped and distributed freely by anyone who believed in it, chiefly on the internet.
And the guy gets impeached for a blowjob. So, isn't it kind of funny if you think about it all, these investigations into a stain on the blue dress, but not so much as an eyebrow raised at the points highlighted in the Clinton murders. We'll give you an example. A guy that was shot a few times in the head, more than once, shot in the head, and it was a suicide by drowning. Okay, so the movie The Clinton Murders, I recommend everyone watch it. It does make a very good case that the Clintons are deeply involved with organized crime, including drug trafficking, blackmail, bribery, and then of course murdering witnesses who could testify against them. And all the good little Democrats voted for him twice. So, number 9, Christian and Muslim. I'm not going to get into a debate about the religion during this video. Suffice to say that I am indeed a Christian, although not the typical conventional sense of the word. I'm not an overly religious person. Hell, I'm not even slightly religious in the traditional sense. I haven't set foot in a church essentially in 20 years, and I don't worship Lucifer on Sunday, though. FYI, the commandment regarding the Sabbath day literally means to keep Saturday holy, and the Luciferian Catholic Church, full of idol worship and perversion, has tricked the Christian world, including the Protestant churches, into worshiping Lucifer on Sunday. So I'm a Christian in the sense that I follow the teachings of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, and try to live by his example. I am not a Christian in the sense that I go to church every Sunday and believe that is somehow going to account for all the people I raped and killed earlier that week. I'm not saying that I or most Christians rape and kill every week, but many Christians believe that church is where you go to be a Christian, and the rest of the week is where you practice debauchery and hedonism, sodomy and hypocritism. As long as you put your best shoes and tie on Sunday, you show up for church regularly, you're going to be forgiven and go to heaven with the little boy fucking priests. With that being said, Jews and Christians and Muslims can typically live in harmony with one another. I know that Yeshua's teachings are the way of the truth and the life. However, I will never prove this or convince anyone who doesn't take the time to study the teachings and apply critical thought to his words. Our mass media opinion machine would love for us to believe that Muslims are our worstest mortal enemies, and that all Muslims want to kill the Americans, and that all Americans should want to kill the Muslims too. The Muslims are our boogeymen, whom we need to constantly fear for our lives against, and we should blow them up with giant bombs. Men and women and children alike. Innocents be damned, in order to keep me safe. In truth, The Muslim extremist terrorists have killed exactly 0.0 people in America since 9/11. And, that's even if you believe the official version of the 9/11 story, which is so disconnected from reality. It's really amazing that anyone bought the line of shit they spewed forth after the event for even a microsecond. Truly, the people of the world will believe anything they see on the idiot box, including, the facts following 9/11. So just to give you a few, less than 20 guys who didn't know how to fly planes flew 4 planes into 3 buildings, which caused 3 huge buildings to be totally obliterated from the map in a couple of hours. The Pentagon, the most surveilled building in the world, didn't have any cameras to capture the 747 jumbo jet crashing into the side of the building, wherein the jumbo jet simply disappeared into a missile-sized hole in the building and left 0 traces of the jumbo jet to be found anywhere. Two of the tallest steel-frame superstructures in the world were destroyed in such a perfect manner that they appeared to have been masterfully crafted controlled demolitions, a feat which takes years of planning and at least months to implement. This just happened magically, where 2 planes flew into the sides of the buildings and somehow melted the columns of steel miles below almost, which is impossible for jet fuel to melt steel in the first place, so quickly that there were literally still people standing right next to the fires that were hot enough to melt the steel, waving t-shirts, totally unscathed until the moment before the free fall occurred. All of NORAD, the most advanced air defense system in the world, was simply not functioning on the morning of 9/11 because, and get this, there were war games in progress that day which were simulating jumbo jets flying into high-profile targets, including specifically the Pentagon and the Twin Towers. This is rather odd considering the fact that the government's official position was that of ignorance. They never could have imagined terrorists flying planes into buildings. By the way, the Twin Towers were actually built to withstand several direct hits from large airplanes.
I don't think anybody could have predicted that these people would take an airplane and slam it into the World Trade Center, take another one and slam it into the Pentagon, that they would try to use an airplane as a missile, a hijacked airplane as a...
What makes a Nazi? How does he get that way? Well, let's look into the process. To begin with, Nazi control over a German child starts as soon as it's born. A young German couple has come to register the birth of their son.
Heil Hitler! Heil Hitler!
Heil Hitler! Unser Führer! As a reward, they get a copy of Germany's bestseller. Now let's see what happens to one of Hitler's children. Kindergarten, and little Hans learns the fairy tales of the New Order. Remember the story of the Sleeping Beauty?
Get ready to read all these words on this page without making a mistake. Look at the letter at the end and remember the sound it makes. Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready to read this word the fast way. Get ready. King. Yes, sound it out. Get ready. King. Sound it out. Get ready. King. What word? Kid. Yes, kid. Boys and girls, sound this word out. Get ready. Steal. What word? Steal. Yes, steal. Read these words the fast way. Get ready. Play. Yes, playing. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Let's read these words the fast way without making a mistake. Get ready. Kite. Yes, kite. Get ready. Kit. Yes, kit. Get ready. Steal. Yes, steal. Get ready. Play. Yes, playing. Get ready. Must. Yes, must. Go to your speaker reader up from under your seat. Open your book up to lesson 60 on page 153. Count of 3, everyone should be on page 153. If the yellow paper is going to bother you, drop it. Thank you. Everybody touch the title of your story. Fingers under the title. Get ready to read the title, The Fast Way. We're waiting for one network. Thank you. Fingers under the title of the story. Get ready. Go. Yes, the pet go. Fingers under the first word of the story. Get ready to read the story the fast way. Get ready. Go, girl, go. Go on.
We all know about the fallacy of the official narrative surrounding 9/11, but we still haven't rectified the main problem with the lie. Those who told the lies and those who broadcast them have gone unpunished. The mass media outlets will parrot anything told to them by the officials in charge of the story. An investigative journalist's job ends when they get the official story from the official person people wearing their official attire and their official badge and name tag. Even if you happen to find a reporter with some degree of integrity and courage, they will simply be removed from their position and will not have the podium to voice their findings. A good example of this would be Amber Lyon. She uncovered a scandal involving the government of Bahrain, which is a dictatorial regime. She found out about all sorts of terrible tragedies and crimes against humanity being committed upon the free, sovereign people of Bahrain. But instead of busting this story wide open, CNN had a propaganda deal with the dictatorship to provide paid infomercials of how lovely and touristy and trendy Bahrain is, and spewed forth their stinking pile of garbages as news stories, not as paid advertisements. So what did they do to Amber Lyon? Well, they sacked her. When Amber Lyon wanted to release the story of all these tragic events going on in Bahrain, CNN indeed sacked her ass quickly and ensured that the story she had uncovered never saw the light of day in any mainstream sense whatsoever. Our news outlets are whores, willing to lie and spread falsities for the entities with enough money to make it attractive for them. Media companies have no obligation, legally anyways, to disseminate the truth. The only obligation such outlets have is the single obligation to their stockholders and to their sponsors to increase their revenues more and more each year. The fact that all performance of any industry is gauged in dollar signs, we've created a world where nothing is sacred, chivalry and honor are dead, and replaced with a taxidermist, mangled recreation of our country we were intended and designed to be. Medical institutions are beholden to the bottom line just as any other business. Instead of being gauged in metrics of how many people did they heal or how many lives did they save, instead, their bottom line metric is simply profit margin, just like any other business. The well-being of our people has been trumped by the bottom line dollar figure, and we wonder why healthcare is so expensive. And yet, what type of thing happens to a person that goes to the hospital who really needs the attention but can't afford it? My wife's mother died a few years ago, and the doctors and the nurses at the hospital treated her as if she were a lump of coal, a commodity or a necessary cost of doing business. How these self-righteous, overpaid doctors who believe they are God forget they're supposed to be there to help make people well. Instead, they add to conditions which make it possible for them to succeed as a doctor without really curing anything, but they do very well for themselves, and so that's all that really matters. In a world where sickness and disease become profitable, then you have a world full of sick and diseased. You will dwell in that guaranteed. The big pharmaceutical companies are no different. Well, actually, they're much worse. There are lots of naturally occurring plants in our world that heal all sorts of different diseases. High-grade hash oil, for example, has now been clinically proven to cure cancer. Could this be why they illegalized the substance that was mandatory for landowners to grow during the times of George Washington? As another example, a little weed called milk thistle has been used as a natural medicine for millennia. Milk thistle has astounding positive effects on the liver and digestive tract, and has been linked to a cure for hepatitis C. Now, if you ask your family, quote, doctor what he thinks about milk thistle, he actually can't comment to you on it whatsoever unless he tells you something negative about it, like to stay away from it. He could actually lose his license if he recommends that you use milk thistle, since it's technically not a drug. According to the FDA, the only thing that can cure a disease is a drug. And according to the laws, a piece of paper in a vault in Washington somewhere, a drug can only be a medicine that is produced in a lab and not something that can be found naturally occurring in the fauna kingdom. To any rational person, this is totally ludicrous, but believe it or not, it's the natural order of business here in the United States of America, where greed trumps everything, even our very own health. So the medical community is forbidden from curing people, especially if that cure is something accessible to any and all for free. I can't believe the level of irony in the medical field. Their job is supposed to be to cure people, so they make people sick and hide the true natural cures from them in order to secure their profit margin. Pure, unbridled capitalism at its very finest. Number 10, communist, capitalist, fascists, all different heads of the same beast, one huge false dichotomy. The 10th divisive dichotomy perpetrated on the world at large, all of the isms, which are identical if you inspect them with any degree of scrutiny, but which also polarize the masses of people who are programmed to identify with one camp or another. Our country wasn't supposed to be any of these things, capitalist, fascist, communist, none of it. However, it entails the worst of all three worlds and then some. Our constitutional republic has been hijacked by a small group of super rich, super greedy, super evil, and self-righteous plutocrats who have morphed our great nation into a den of vipers, each individual person driven by their own greed, programmed by the nonsensical dichotomies designed and executed by a shadow government who holds no elections. Their power remains fixed and in place while we silly laymen squabble amongst one another about every specific argument we're told is important by the talking heads on the idiot box and the talking heads in the federal school system. We believe we have a choice in this Hegelian world, but in truth our choices are made for us long before we get to vote or even consider the candidates. Any candidate who makes it to the national spotlight is by definition an insider and will never have the true interests of the American people close to their heart. Whether Kennedy did indeed have such ideals in his heart, only he would have known, but it's certain that no other political figure is going to save us from this beast we've all helped to create by our standard indifference and feelings of insignificance in the grand scheme of things. We've been taught to be politically correct, so we can only subscribe to pro-life or pro-choice. Don't ever mention the fact that pro-choice is actually pro-dead baby, because it doesn't sound very attractive to your average sheeple person who may otherwise have identified with that camp. We've been taught to assume that the police always had the right to kick in your door and beat the shit out of you and arrest you for no reason. We've been taught to believe it's okay for televangelists to preach false doctrine for a profit so long as they're making people feel good about themselves. We've been taught to sit idly by while common sense definitions of simple ideas such as marriage become relative and absolutely intended for men and women to join as one in the flesh is now sort of up for debate. Or actually legal, as that definition is totally wrong anymore, as of, a week from yesterday? So we're taught to think that whatever is told to us officially by the talking heads on the idiot box must be true and correct, since they're the ones smart enough to be sitting there on the other side of the idiot box, and we're just little insignificant nobody without the say in the matter. Herd mentality is the way in which they want us to think. As long as you fit in with the herd around you, then you've got nothing to be afraid of. I don't care if they tap all my communications. I've got nothing to hide, so my privacy is irrelevant. Slowly, God is being taken out of our society, which is the last nail in the coffin for the fate of America, which is just about sealed. Our society is so busy reacting to all the talking points injected into their minds by the opinion factories such as Fox or MSN that we totally miss the important things, the obvious things. So what is the problem with secret societies? Well, Satan, Lucifer, Isis, the grand architect of the universe, Horus, Zeus, the Statue of Liberty, the Light Bearer, Sirius, the Dog Star, Columbia, Athena, all mythological stories. But there must be some truth to the stories of the fallen angels, regardless of the name you choose to call them. In all likelihood, we haven't a clue their true names, but throughout history we have all sorts of stories of, quote, extraterrestrials, for lack of a better word, or entities coming down from the heavens to the earth and getting to know the daughters of men. It's the hair. Seriously, this is why many Middle Eastern cultures cover their women's heads. It's to prevent the Nephilim from taking their women, according to some accounts. So every single culture of the world states the same thing. The native Central South Americans, the Mayans, they had figures like Kukulkan. If you agree with the translations of those like Zechariah Sitchin, Kukulkan was the leader of an extraterrestrial group who came down from the heavens and did all sorts of genetic manipulation, specifically to create the first man and the first woman in a clay jar. According to Greek and Roman mythology, what happened to the gods who lived in the sky? Well, they manipulated the world and literally mated with the humans to create genetic hybrids. Not only men, such as Hercules and Perseus, genetic hybrid humans, but also all sorts of abominations like centaurs and minotaurs. The ancient Egyptian myths talk about Osiris, whose dismembered penis is commemorated every single time you see an obelisk such as the Washington Monument, the largest obelisk in the world. So Osiris was the sun god who lived in the sky but was reincarnated from pharaoh to pharaoh, or some weird shit like that, right? It's also plainly obvious that if you look at Egyptian hieroglyphs, which are not found anywhere on or near the Great Pyramids at Giza, it's obvious that they believed in all sorts of genetic hybrids, including half bird men, half gator men, genetic manipulation conducted by the gods. So I could go on and on about how every single ancient civilization, with very few exceptions, have written in verbal histories of essentially the same exact story, with different names and slightly different variations, but by and large, they all share common themes galore. The Bible, part of which was written from accounts of the pre-Diluvian world or before the Great Flood told in Noah, tells us the truth. These, quote, gods worshipped by the ancient pagans were not gods at all. They were servants of the Creator originally, led by Lucifer. A third of the servants joined with Lucifer and decided to attempt the overthrow of God and corrupt God's most precious creation, whom he made in his own image. The fallen angels lusted after the daughters of men and actually mated with humans, manipulated them into believing they, the fallen angels, were the gods. They deceived our Creator's most prized creation and corrupted them, and seduced or forced themselves unwillingly onto worshiping them. Their offspring, a genetic abomination, were actually giants, the renowned men of old, the Nephilim. Luciferians and high-up Freemasons alike believe the Nephilim are actually our creators, the oldest lie in the book, and warned to us implicitly by the Bible. And they believe that there is no God or creator in the universe. They believe that the fallen angels are God, and whether you know it or not, when you go into your secret club for boys only, oh my God, what a bunch of pansies, they mislead the initiates into giving them their money every year so that they can learn their secret handshakes and get inside deals that the non-initiates don't have access to. Makes the Freemasons feel sort of special. They've got a leg up on everyone. So you think the whole thing is about secret handshakes and brotherhood. However, if you were to proceed through the degrees, which most Masons are apparently not crafty enough to do so, they would eventually find that the upper echelons at the tip-top of all Freemasonic organizations have been secretly and incrementally taken over by those who worship the fallen angels and who are inherently psychotic, deceptive, and rich off of all the suckers at the bottom paying their dues every month, just for a start.
Okay. So we moved to Milwaukee in 1974. Because there were 80 people that had wanted us to train them how to be witches. And so we went there, and partly because I couldn't get a job in Dubuque, it was a bad period in the economy, and so we had class after class after class where we were teaching people witchcraft. And we were the ancillary stuff too, astrology, tarot cards, mediumship, parapsychology, astral travel. And we just, we were virtually a little free university. We'd have a semester and we'd have about 10 or 15 people. We'd train them and then we'd run them through. And then and I see you can only have 13 members in a coven. And so we set up 2 or 3 different covens, and Sharon became a witch queen, which means someone who has a high priestess who has several covens under her. One of the people in the coven at that time happened to have a dad who was the junior warden of a Masonic lodge in Heartland, Wisconsin. Now, a junior warden is like one of the top 3 officers in a local Masonic body. And so I thought, well, this high-level druid, the Grand Master of all druids in North America, whose name, oddly enough, was Eli, he said if I ever had an opportunity to join the Masons, do so. So I had said, well, can this guy get me into the Masons? And so he did. And you see there, that's my certificate for, I don't know how well you can see it, but all of these things are in my books if you want to see better documentation. On March 24th, 1977, I was finally raised to the sublime degree of a Master Mason, which is the top of the Blue Lodge degrees. Subsequently, I went on and went through York Rite, went through Scottish Rite, went through the Shrine. So basically, I did essentially everything one could do in Masonry and even some stuff that most people can't do in Masonry, as we'll see later. Along the way, now this might seem a radical change of direction, but a funny thing happened to me. I had just been made a high priest of the Druidic Order. I was a high priest of witchcraft, and we were down in Chicago visiting some friends at the Temple of the Pagan Way, which is another occult organization. Chicago is full of them. Anyway, we all got together, and guess what movie was playing at that time? Big, huge movie, The Exorcist. And so we thought, oh, this will be a kick, let's go see the movie. And so there were like 3 sets of high priest, high priestess witches. 3 couples, plus the guy who was the head of the Temple of the Pagan Way in Chicago. And we all sat in this theater, and we were all scared to death. I mean, it was so funny because this lady who was sitting next to me, it wasn't Sharon, she was like another high priestess. She grabbed my hand in this like death grip and wouldn't let it go for the whole movie. And I don't know if any of you have defiled your minds by seeing that film, but that is probably the evilest movie ever made. And it was so profoundly scary and evil, for reasons I don't have time to go into, that the fellow who we were staying with down there, who happened to be an epileptic, he actually had a grand mal seizure that night. It had hit his nervous system that violently. And it kind of scared me, and I thought, well, gee, maybe I should do something with this Catholic thing. I kind of put the whole Catholic scene aside. Well, as it happens, I heard through a friend of mine who ran an occult bookstore that there was an old Roman Catholic church in town. Now, probably none of you even heard of the old Roman Catholic Church. But what it is, it's a branch of the Church of Utrecht in Holland, which was cut away from the Vatican by various Protestant Catholic divisions back in the 1700s. And so this has existed as a whole separate parallel church to the Catholic Church. The only difference is 1, they allow married clergy, 2, they say the Mass in the vernacular, and 3, they do not accept the last 2 councils, in other words, Vatican I or Vatican II. So this fellow was willing to ordain me, get me ordained to the priesthood, in exchange for me ordaining him a witch priest. So he kind of, swapped initiations. So this is a picture of me. This is actually during the ordination ceremony this is in St. Paul's Church, Old Catholic Church in Joliet, Illinois. There's my certificate, June 5th, 1976. I already explained about the Roman Rite of Utrecht. This is another shot of the same thing where I'm kneeling. The bishop there is about to lay hands on me. Notice his little Dagon fish hat that he's wearing. That's very important. Okay, so, and all this, you see, it was like I was gathering power. This is how I looked at it, because see, this druid guy had explained to me that there's all these different currents of occult power. And I explain all this in my book, Lucifer Dethroned, but like for all of the, you have the 13 members of Jesus's covenant, right? And each one of those apostles had a certain current of power that went out from him. Like, for example, the Johannine current of power was the Freemasons. The Petrine current for Peter was the Roman Church, and so on and so on and so on. And so it was like I was going around picking up these things, sort of like, hash marks on my spiritual aura or whatever. So that's what I was doing. I wasn't just being, and people might think, well, what kind of a wacko person is a witch and goes and is ordained a Catholic priest? Well, it's not as strange as you think, and we'll explore more about that later. Anyhow, once I'd gone this far, another thing happened. This same friend who stood up at my wedding as my best man, he owned this occult bookstore in Milwaukee I referred to, and he said, one day he came up to me and he says, you know, you really ought to read this book. And he handed me a copy of the Satanic Bible. Now, if you talk to anybody who's a white witch, they'll say, oh, witches aren't Satanists, witches don't believe in Satan, we worship nature. You know, we're out skipping through the woods, gathering herbs and worshiping the gentle goddess and the great God. You know, tra-la-la. So, you know, this was sort of odd because this guy was supposedly a Wiccan. But he said, this guy has some good ideas. So I read the book and I found out that indeed Anton LaVey, who wrote the Satanic Bible, the guy who was the head of the Church of Satan for many years, that he did have some interesting ideas. And you see, this is how it works. Once you set your foot in this direction, you know, you get more deceived, you get more deceived. You know, it's not like I woke up, you know, one morning when I was a high school kid and said, I want to worship the devil. You know, it was a gradual process. And especially when you understand that the Church of Satan doesn't worship the devil. How many of you realize that? The Church of Satan does not worship the devil. They just view the devil as a symbol, as an archetype. Now, there are, of course, Satanists that do worship the devil, but that's why basically we call the Church of Satan comic opera Satanism, because it's really not that serious a thing. Not that it's not dangerous, but compared to other forms of Satanism, it's not that dangerous. So I went through the first degree of the Church of Satan and then made it all the way up to second degree. You'll notice there, that's my certificate. I was made a warlock in the Church of Satan. You'll notice there down at the bottom is Anton LaVey's autograph. I have the dubious distinction of having his autograph. I want to note that in the last paragraph, it says, the Church of Satan, having passed before the Council of Nine, order of the trapezoid, by all the powers of hell, so it is done. That's kind of like saying amen. Well, notice that order of the trapezoid, because that's going to be important later. This is what set me on what occultists call the left-hand path. And from then on, I was both pursuing Masonry and many other things and still doing the Catholic priest thing, but I was also doing the satanic thing. Now you might think, how could anybody do that at the same time? Well, you've got to realize, first of all, once you get past the basic Satanism of Anton LaVey's church, you discover that in order to be a practicing satanic priest, you first of all had to be a Catholic priest. Did you realize that? Now, this is not intended as a slam on Catholicism, although there's certainly a talk there somewhere. But the problem is that, you see, the classical black mass, les messes noires in the French, is a ritual that's an inversion of the Catholic ceremony, the Catholic liturgy that you've all probably seen pictures of if you've not actually attended one. And except they have the cross upside down, the priest wears dark vestments, and they have a naked woman on the altar. And what they do is they believe that the host is really the body of Jesus. And so they abuse this host. They stomp on it, they urinate on it, they do things I won't even describe to it, and they believe by doing that they're torturing Jesus. Now this is bizarre, I know, but this is what they believe. And so it's really handy if you can have a priest there to do his hocus pocus. Now, how many of you realize the word hocus pocus comes from the Latin Mass? Did you know that? It was a thing that Protestants came up with to make fun of Catholics, because the words in Latin, the priest picks up the host and he says, for this is my body. And what that is Latin is hoc est inem corpus meum. So it's like hocus pocus. And the idea that you say this as a priest, and poof, this piece of bread turns into the body of Jesus. Body, blood, soul, and divinity. And ditto with the wine. So anyway, then if you were actually a Catholic priest who was also a satanic priest, you could do the satanic mass, have the host right there, and you could abuse it to your heart's content. And thereby thinking you were somehow insulting, you know, Jesus Christ up in heaven. So it's not as bizarre as you think. If you look at the history of Satanism, most of the prominent Satanists were also Catholic priests or Catholic bishops. I'll just name two. Aleister Crowley, some of you may have heard of him. He was consecrated a bishop in the old Roman Church. And also Anton LaVey. Believe it or not, he ended up doing the same thing I did. he got a Greek Orthodox bishop, who shall remain nameless, to consecrate him a bishop in return for him making the Greek Orthodox bishop a priest of Satan. So it gets kind of fuzzy here, folks. Now here you see me in my ceremonial magical garb. I was involved in all sorts of high-level magic, including thalamic magic, which means magic that's based on the works of Aleister Crowley, who was the most prominent black magician of the last century, and Enochian magic, which has nothing to do with like Enoch in the Bible. It's a very complicated thing that was brought forth by Dr. John Dee, who was the original 007. Have you heard of Dr. John Dee? He was Queen Elizabeth I. This is way back 400 years ago. Queen Elizabeth's premier spy. And he was also a high-level occultist, an alchemist, and a ceremonial magician. And she would send him into Europe to spy on different countries, and he would send missives back, and he'd always sign his name 007. That was his little code designation. That's where Ian Fleming got the thing for James Bond. So anyhow, see all this interesting trivia you're picking up here? Anyway, at this time I was also a member of the Brotherhood, and that's hardcore Satanism. See, if you think of it like this, you could think of the Church of Satan as kind of like marijuana, and hardcore Satanism is like cocaine or acid or heroin or something. So it's like a gateway into deeper, darker levels of the occult. And along the way, I had to sign my name in the black book. I had to sell my soul to the devil. I didn't know the devil already had my soul, but you know, I made a pact. And the pact was that for 7 years, I would serve Satan faithfully, that he would have me body, soul, and spirit. He would give me anything I requested: wine, women, song, drugs, power, whatever I wanted I could have. In exchange for that, at the end of 7 years, he'd get to kill me and take me to hell. What a deal. How many of you want to sign up? You got to realize, Satanists are taught that there's this kind of, I don't know if you've heard of the philosopher Nietzsche, but Nietzsche taught that Christians were like slave mentality, and that the true masters were the Ubermen, the Supermen.
Their, quote, worshipful master, or the head of the Masonic Lodge, is probably a 32 or 33rd degree Mason, which is actually nothing in the grand scheme of things. And he's essentially in the middle of the power pyramid structure, and certainly not at the top of the pyramid. Of course, the grand architect of the universe is supposedly at the tippy top, but below that you have the Council of Seven, whom are anonymous to most Freemasons. Freemasonry is only one path to occult esoteric practices, which are indeed identical to Luciferian satanic rituals. Another path to this would definitely be a career in the music or film industry, but that's sort of straying off topic, and it's a different system altogether, only connected at the top, just as everything else is. So you see, what you don't seem to understand, or most Freemasons don't understand as a layman, the entire world is essentially manipulated by a very small group of people who comprise less than 0.1% of the world's population, but hold something ridiculous like 90% of the world's wealth and real assets. This group actually owns the Federal Reserve Bank, which is the entity which prints all of our money. It lends it to the government at interest. The Federal Reserve Bank, or the Fed for short, is, again, it's about as federal as McDonald's, meaning it's a private business that is owned and operated with complete impunity and zero oversight by the government or the American people, to say the least. The Fed literally invents money out of thin air, then loans that money to our government at interest, and the government must pay them back with real things. So you basically invented a piece of paper, loaned it to somebody, and then got a house out of the deal. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. You can't create wealth or create any sort of property out of just writing numbers down on a piece of paper, yet that's what the Fed has the ability to do in our country. Slowly but surely, the currency devalues, so they just print more of it. And as this occurs, the big banks affiliated with and in direct cahoots with the Fed become richer and richer using a process called fractional reserve banking, which ultimately allows all FDA-approved banks to also invent money out of thin air and loan it to their customers, the public, at interest. So we have all of this hypothetical money just being invented and generated out of thin air and then loaned out to the government or the people at interest, while the value of the currency perpetually plummets and the big banks are able to suck up real things like property and real assets, while the average person just works their ass off all day long, all night long, 7 days a week, just to barely scrape by. All the while, the Fed and the private banks simply just invent money out of thin air and loan it to us at interest. So we're paying them back real money out the sweat of our brow for a number they entered into a computer and gave to you at interest. So if you don't see the completely obvious problem with this, then you haven't thought about it hard enough. Think about it again. Now, how is it possible that we have such a situation where the banks are literally raping and robbing us from every direction, haven't even mentioned taxes, and the government doesn't do anything about it? Well, I'll give you the one-word answer. Freemasons. I know you don't want to hear it, but that's exactly the answer. Andrew Jackson, granted a Freemason, his last words were, "I killed the bank," in 1845. I think there was a time in history when not all of Freemasonry had been overthrown by Luciferianism, or perhaps at least they had much better frontmen, or since they control history by being on the winning side of every war, since they create and fund both sides of every war. French Freemasonry was certainly deep into the occult long before America was fully formed as a republic for many years. You know, most Freemasons don't know about Adam Weishaupt and the creation of the Illuminati in 1776. Back to the banks, though, how could Andrew Jackson, and I'm actually a big fan of Andrew Jackson as well as Thomas Jefferson, to be very honest, if we can assume that most of the stories about them are true. Who fucking knows? But how could they have killed the bank if only a few decades after his death we got the 1913 Federal Reserve Act that was slipped past Congress by certain Freemasons, not going to mention any names, but Rothschild Chew, they waited until the week before Christmas, while all other Congress people were away on winter vacation, without giving anyone notice. They held a secret meeting of a few Freemason congressmen to pass an act of Congress which allowed a private bank owned by you-know-who, which would loan all the money to the government and centralize the currency into a single plate. The Freemasons had created a pretext for this by creating the boom and bust called the Great Depression, which was obviously planned and executed by Freemasons, who were doing all the insider trading and manipulating that they're so famous for because they're heartless scumbags at the top, in order to capitalize on the fact that the Great Depression occurred. Almost everyone in the U.S. got poor as shit during the Great Depression, but a handful of inside traders, who by definition meet in secret to plan things for their own personal gain at the expense of everyone else, got rich as hell. So, in 1913, at Jekyll Island in Georgia, a handful of Freemason Illuminati member scumbags passed the Federal Reserve Act, which was supposed to prevent a little thing called inflation by regulating the value of the currency, or by direct extension via the interest rates. So in other words, the people of the U.S. would never have allowed Freemasons to secretly do this whole Federal Reserve thing if it weren't for the pretext caused by the Great Depression, which was caused on purpose to create the exact conditions needed to justify the Fed by the Freemasons all across the board. Again, for the supposed purpose of preventing inflation. Now, if you look at the U.S. dollar value on a timeline charted over, say, the last 120 years, you'll see that the value of the currency remained about the same prior to the Great Depression, where it did slump a little, but had ultimately acted like a normal market does, which is remained balanced. A fair and normal market will always find balance. Now, if you have an honest free market, things will be balanced by nature. There's no reason to have to correct things and change interest rates. It's just the way markets work, if you're being fair. It's when you add into the mix certain entities who, say, have the ability to create money out of thin air and loan it to everyone else at interest, where you have bubbles and busts which are used to further manipulate the world into believing we need to be saved by the Fed, the very Freemasons who got us into the entire mess in the first place. Think of it this way. You have a room full of 100 people, and everyone is about the same in most ways. They need to divide the wealth of the 100 between everyone evenly. But let's say you have 5 people who meet secretly and decide they want to rip off the rest of the people, but of course they don't want to get caught. But the secretive, tricky group of 5, they also pick the dumbest, or at least the most trusting out of the 100. They pick 15 of these people who are not in on the true agenda to scam the 100. So they do all sorts of neat stuff, like promise to help the 15 get rich, or look out for the 15 if they're in distress, but they do require the gullible 15 to pay them some of their money every month. Okay, so they teach the 15 all these cool secret handshakes and make them swear never to divulge the secrets of the 20, or they'll be disemboweled and have their throats slit, etc. So the gullible 15 think that they're going to learn all sorts of really great, cool secrets, but the secrets that they learn turn out to be rather boring, don't really make much sense, and certainly not worth all the money that they're giving to the leaders of the group, the original 5. But the 5 are really smart, and they keep the gullible 15 occupied with all sorts of mysterious books that seem to have a ring of truth and seem to have answers to some of life's more interesting riddles. Now, the rest of the 100 people, we'll call them the 80, are totally oblivious to the 20, and especially to the 5. And of course, the 20 are oblivious to the 5 as well. Now, the 20 are really wise and really enlightened, according to the other 80, because they have all this insider information. They seem to do very well for themselves because they look out for one another, and they have a group which will, get your back if something happens. So a few are tasked with presiding over the 100. Not the brightest by any means of the 20, but certainly the most charming, lovable, best public speaker, or maybe just had the best tie or the nicest smile. Trustworthy face. All the 100 vote for him due to herd mentality. Since 20 of the people very much stoked about this candidate, it was peanuts to get the other 100 to vote for them. And of course, the one they wanted elected gets elected. So now it's time to divvy up the money. People do all sorts of important jobs like keeping the place clean. I mean, hell, with 100 people pooing every day, it's certainly important, agreed. Making sure there's something for everyone to eat. Basically doing all the work. So some of the people raise livestock. Many of them provide services like, massages and such. Lots of hardworking people around to make the place where the 100 dwell a decent place to live. Now, the 20 are actually really great builders, so they're respected and trusted due to the fact that we're all inherently connected. We need buildings, they're great builders, and a free society is meant to be a place where people can trust one another. So one day, a masked bandit comes through the place where the 100 dwell and steals all the money for the month. And so everyone is in a major state of fear. Oh my God, who would ever come through and steal all this money from the lovely 100? So the president, the gullible puppet, gets up at the podium and tells the other 99 people how terrible that was and how we should all be afraid of the single masked bandit. There are a few journalists, of course, amongst the 100, so they take notes verbatim on the president's speech to make sure that anyone who might not have made it that night will know exactly what's going on and exactly the solution to the masked bandit. So, they are told by the gullible president, if everyone puts their money into a safe place and it's guarded 24 hours a day, then we no longer have to worry about the masked bandit and you can get your money at any time, don't worry. But of course, the guards and the people who change out the money, they have to get paid too, along with the 5 people who own the bank and need to sit there doing fuck all day long. They need to get paid too. But the 5 people, the leaders of the secret group, one of whom was actually the masked bandit, unbeknownst to anyone except for the other 4, decide that it's simply not enough to get this little bit of interest. They actually want to own everything that the 100 own, because it's really not enough for them to have their fair share for doing absolutely fuck all day long. They tell their people that their money isn't worth as much as it used to be, so they all need to work a little bit harder to buy the things that they need. But the bank can actually give them a bunch of money if they promise to pay it back and a little bit more for the interest. Who doesn't want free money, right? Especially in a time when it's getting harder and harder to buy things that you need, and you can only work so hard. There's only so many hours in the day, right? So thank goodness for these 20, the Freemasons lending us money, right? So the 80 people, and even some of the 15, will go out and get the loan and enjoy themselves on it for a bit. But after a while, when those monthly payments come due, they simply can't afford to pay it. They didn't realize that when they took out the loans at the same time that this increased the money supply even more, which made their money worth even less. So now they have to work even harder to pay back money that's more than they originally borrowed when their money was actually worth something. So of course the 15 did okay because they're good buddies with the 5. And they thank God they were in that group, because if they hadn't have joined into the group of 20, they would have been in bad shape, just like the poor other 80. So when the 80 couldn't pay back all that money to the bank now has the right to own their chicken farm and their massage parlor. Even the very homes in which they dwell now belong to the bank. The 5 and even the 15 ended up owning all the property and the stores and the businesses that did the services. But something had changed within the 100. The 80 sort of lost their pride because all they do is work and pay back the loans that were graciously given to them by the bank. But they can barely afford to keep the lights on or to keep food on the table. So the 15 will try to help out some of the 80 as best as they can, which means the group of 20 is obviously a very nice, very generous group. Who cares about the 80, right? Indeed, that's how it would seem. But then a voice comes from the back of the room which says loudly and clearly,
"I know who was behind the masked bandit."
And a hushed awe is heard from the crowd of 100.
"I found detailed plans of the heist, and the masked bandit was actually one of the 5.
And the crowd begins to hush with murmurs.
"Did any of you think how the bank ended up owning everything? They don't do any work. They don't generate anything of value, and they're just supposed to be there to keep us from worrying about the masked bandit. So we gave them all our money, but now the value has dropped. So did any of you think, where did they get all the money that they loaned us? They simply printed money out of thin air, and by loaning it to us at interest and intentionally devaluing the currency, you have simply handed over all your real assets to this group of liars who tricked you into forking over everything you've worked so hard to gain in trade for worthless paper, and you all fell for it."
Then starts the 15. This is where the Freemasons, the initiate laymen, come in.
No, the 20, they would never do that. You have no idea what you're talking about, and I can swear on a stack of Bible that it's true. The 5 would never do anything like that. They've helped us all to get through this financial crisis caused by the masked bandit. I go to all the secret meetings, and I can attest that they've never planned anything like that, because 20 know each other's secrets. Trust me, we know each other real well.
The other 14 of the 15 parrot similar stories, all very honestly and truthfully and believably, but only because they were not aware of the original plan of the 5. They were used. So Freemasonry was taken over by psychopaths who worship Lucifer, whether you choose to believe it or not. If you will deny Yeshua Christ because you have been misled to believe that he was brought up in the mystery schools and was an enlightened, worshipful master, but just a regular person and that's it, even if you think highly of Jesus, I don't know. But the truth is, the secret societies of our world are exactly poison to a free and open society where people must trust one another and typically do not dick each other over. The problem with secret societies is that they are attractive to psychopaths who have ultimately taken control from the top down of all levers of power in the world. Normal people simply do not have designs to rape and rob the world. That includes members of the 15. But if you cannot understand that the Fed was started by the Illuminati, or the 5, 9/11, the Illuminati, World War I and World War II, the Illuminati, the Boston Tea Party, the original one, It was a false flag where Freemasons dressed up like Indians and dumped all the tea into the bay. That was the Freemasons. Geronimo, he was a Freemason, a false flag boogeyman designed to justify the slaughter of innocent Native Americans. The mind control of the world, the Illuminati. The moon landing hoax, the Illuminati. Blood diamonds in the Rhodes Company, the Illuminati. The Illuminati will use the Hegelian Dialectic ad nauseum to pass their agenda, and it works all the time because people are inherently trustworthy and oblivious to the facts. So they inherently trust people who are neat and clean with a nice suit and lots of money. Sure, why not trust him? He seems like a nice guy and he's got lots of money. So they have all the money so they can fund both sides of the conflicts and use agent provocateurs to create conflicts, co-opt any movement that seems to be threatening their agenda. Take a look at Alex Jones, for example, and make sure that the unwashed masses never catch wind of their plans. They use ignorant initiates such as yourself to provide a legitimate cover for their true agenda, which is always ultimately selfish and for their own personal gain at the expense of everyone else, including and especially the layman initiate Freemasons. They literally pay them cash every month. Everyone else needs to be tricked out of their money, but the layman Freemasons give it to them willingly. The Fed needs to go because there's no reason for the Five to have the ability to create money out of thin air and charge interest and essentially steal all of our real assets. This is slavery, and now they own everything. It's gullible people like the layman Freemasons who've allowed it to continue for so long. I say no more.